right. Forgive the barking dog, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the June 17, 2021 meeting of the Assembly Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee of the Whole. And we're about to begin our agenda. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Ms. France. Mr. Presberdia. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
And Ms. Zalatel. You have a quorum.
This is Miss Zalatel. I'm here.
Yep, we got you. And thank you. Ms. LaFrance notified me that she would be late.
And I'm here now. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Ms. LaFrance is here. So on to the agenda. The agenda before us is printed. Are there any items anyone would like to add at this time? Hearing none, we're going to move right into the Eklutna Hydroelectric Project update by Chugach Electric Association. Julie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. The update is on behalf of all of the owners who are running this project as a team. Let me see if I can see who's here. I know we have Mike Brody and myself from Chugach. We have, I saw Tony Zellers from Matanuska Electric in the, there's Tony. And then we have Samantha Owen, who's running the project for us, basically, in the field especially. So Samantha is going to take the floor and give us the update, and then we'll answer your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Samantha Owen. I'm with McMillan Jacobs Associates, and I've been contracted by the owners of the Eklutna Hydroelectric Project to help them through this process. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick. Give me 1 second. And then just let me know when everyone can see that.
I think we can all see it, Sam.
Okay,
Sam,
great.
Can you see it?
Awesome. Well, I'm just gonna jump right in. So we have a pretty standard agenda for you guys. Last time we were with you was in March 2021, so we're going to be providing an update on everything we've been doing since March. And you can see what we're going to talk about there, and then we're going to go through our next steps and then have time for questions after that. So I'll try to stop at each slide and or maybe just hold questions to the end is probably best. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So right when we were meeting with you guys in March, we had gone through our second round of review for the study plans. We first had our draft study plans, and then we went to our revised draft study plans. And then in February, we had our, we revised them again, and we called them the proposed final study plans. And we sent them out to the parties to the 1991 agreement for their review and concurrence. And at the time when we were here last, we were waiting on people's concurrence on our study plans. So long story short, over the months of March and April, we received concurrence letters from all the parties to the agreement. And there's also a requirement in the 1991 agreement that we coordinate with the governor or consult with the governor on the schedule associated with the studies. And so we sent the state concurrence letters and the study plans to AEA, the Alaska Energy Authority, as the governor's representative for their review. We did not receive any additional feedback from AEA, but with the comments we received and feedback we did receive from the parties and other TWG members or our technical work group members, we finalized our study plans, and you can see I have a nice little clip of that over there on the right, dated May 2021. Oops, why does it keep doing that? Weird. And so shortly after, and when I say shortly after, probably the week following finalizing our study plans, we actually initiated our field work right away. And here are some pictures of our guys out in the field. On the left, we're sampling for fish in the lower river. And then on the right, you can see Steve is holding up one of our scour monitors. This is going to help us evaluate scour and sediment transport in the river during our flow releases. And the way that works is you can see some of the little beads right there. As sediment it scours out and gets transported downstream, more and more of those beads are uncovered. And so by looking at the number of beads that are uncovered, we can determine the amount of scour that's happened in a particular location. But we have a whole suite of studies going on, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions people have about that. Next slide. We're also out in the field regarding the drainage outlet gate here just about a week or so ago. I think last time I was here, we were talking about how we were planning on using the drainage gate in order to conduct our controlled flow releases later this year. And we had done our condition assessment last August, and that condition assessment revealed that there's a giant pile of rocks sitting in front of the drainage gate. And so actually in March, probably right after we talked to you guys, we did an internal assessment and decided that, you know, in all likelihood, the condition assessment, whenever we did get the rocks out of the way, was going to reveal that the gate was old and rusted, had been sitting underwater for a long time. And so in order to mitigate some schedule risks, we went ahead and ordered a new drainage gate to be installed later this year. And so that was ordered back in March. It's actually scheduled to be delivered here in the next week or so. And then we had our divers out there last week removing those rocks from in front of the gate so that we can successfully do the gate installation in the July-August timeframe. And then of course our study flow releases are planned for September. Also last week, we were out in the field with our technical work group. Here's a nice group photo. The purpose of this site visit was to nail down some exact transect and monitoring study locations in the river. So our study plans identified some very general areas, and we weren't able to do those exact locations over the winter. So we had committed to working with the technical work group this spring to get out in the field together and walk the river and really identify those exact monitoring locations. And so that's what we were doing last week. And we had some really good involvement and really good input. I think it was a very productive site visit, everyone together. We had the village, Trout Unlimited, Fish and Game was there, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and some staff from APU, as well as all of our technical experts and team. So that was a very productive site visit. Oh my gosh.
I just briefly would put on the record that Mr. Presverdia has arrived at the meeting.
Okay, great. And then we've also been continuing our additional stakeholder outreach. So we've had some ongoing coordination with the native village of Eklutna. I think just within the last couple weeks, we had a very productive meeting with their tribal leadership, including some of their board members, and just giving them an update on, you know, what we've been doing for the past few months and since the last time we met with them in September. And we have plans to continue to coordinate with them this year, get another in-person meeting, hopefully later this year, and conduct a site visit with their tribal leadership sometime this summer. We also gave a update kind of presentation to the Chugiak Community Council, and we met directly with the AWOOD Board of Directors, seeing as how they're very closely tied into this project with all of their existing infrastructure as well. And that's an update that they requested. And then we're continuing to engage with our broader stakeholder group through our quarterly newsletters, our quarterly update calls, and then updating our project website. So continuing to make sure that anyone who wants information on this project or wants to be involved in this project and know what's going on has that information available to them. And we'll continue to do that going forward. And then just regarding next steps, we're obviously going to continue our field work. I think we're going to probably have people out in the field here every week from now through, end of October, potentially early November, depending on weather. And then, like I was talking about, we're going to be installing that new drainage gate here this summer so that we can facilitate our flow releases in the fall. and we'll be obtaining the remaining permits and authorizations for those flow releases. We do have a few outstanding items that we're still waiting on. We're coordinating with the Department of Natural Resources Dam Safety Group to get our certificate of approval to install that new drainage gate. And then we're also coordinating on some legal and liability issues with downstream landowners. And we've heard back from DOT and from Eklutna Inc. at this point. We're still waiting to hear back from the AWU and the railroad with their official comments on the draft document we sent out. And we're working through some hiccups with DOT, and that's all in the works at this point. We've also been reaching out to the other parties to the agreement to close some funky legal loopholes in the 1991 agreement and make sure everyone is on the same page with all of that going forward. So that's kind of the general nature of the remaining authorizations that we need, but we actually have most of our permits in hand for our general field work. Some of the outstanding stuff is just really related to those flow releases. And then we're going to continue our stakeholder engagement like I talked about before. And then once we finish our field season this year, we're going to jump right into study planning for next year. So I think that's all I have here, and I'll probably open the floor up for questions to see if anyone wants any further detail on any of those topics.
All right, nobody is in the chat yet, but does any of the membership have questions? Not seeing any questions. I apologize if I missed this at the last second. I was a bit distracted. Did you lay out what the program is for the next quarter?
Oh, what our next steps are going forward for the few months?
Just, yeah, so we can kind of mentally prepare for the next meeting in the fall.
Yeah, so when we come back in the fall, we'll have completed a lot of our field season at that point, and so our update will really be an update on how our field season is progressing and going. So I guess if it's June right now, that'll be July, August, September. When we meet with you guys in September, hopefully there will actually be flow releases in the river at that time. So that'll be a really exciting time to touch base with you guys.
And that, of course, raises the question. I saw you had all of that crew out there. Is it possible we might have somebody who's interested on the body participate in going out there and seeing the work?
Yeah, I know we're opening up a field visit opportunity to the native village. And so Julie, I don't know if maybe that would be the appropriate time or if we would want to schedule some other time, but I mean, we will have people in the field and we'll be in and around the area all summer. So I'm sure we can find a time to make that happen.
Thanks. So what I would recommend is ask the native village if they want to have the company. If they do, great. If they don't, then we would schedule another time.
That's a great idea, Chris. We're kind of waiting for them. We've asked them, what do they want to see versus just picking a random date? What do they actually want to see? Do they want to see fish counting? They want to wait till the flow releases. We could ask the same question. I guess my question back to you would be maybe to pick like 2 assembly members who might go out, because obviously safety is always our key and making sure the work gets done, but people are all safe. So let's
Absolutely.
talk about in the intervening weeks here an opportunity to get a couple assembly members out for a site visit, whether it's with Native Village or on your own.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then my follow-up question to that, again, just kind of piling on what Julie said, is it would be really if it's an interest in more of a site visit, in which case we can just walk the river and show you guys the different things that we're looking at, or if you're interested in seeing some of the actual data collection. And if it's the latter, then like Julie said, maybe let us know what you're interested in seeing, and then we can let you know when our guys will plan on being out there. So it's maybe more of a question of what and not when, but if it's maybe a general site visit, we can squeeze that in anytime.
Thanks. We'll confer and figure that out.
Okay, great.
Now I do have a question from Ms. Kennedy. Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is just in regard to what kind of public notification is really going on. I know safety is an important thing, but I also know that people have a tendency to wander into places where maybe they shouldn't go. So what kind of notification is there in that area that kind of warns the public about this ongoing project, and particularly when those flow releases happen? How are you making the public aware of the potential safety issues there? Thanks.
Yes, that's an excellent question. The short answer is I don't have an answer for you yet, but we are in the process of developing a public safety plan for those flow releases with the understanding that it's not normal operations to put water down the river. Technically, all of that is private land. Most of the land down there is private land owned by Eklutna Inc., but I think we all know just from evidence of, walking around and seeing people's hats and cell phones and water bottles left in the river that people are down there. And so we have it on our to-do list to come up with a public safety plan and work with the agents, the appropriate agencies in the area to put up warning signs and things like that. So I don't have an exact answer for you yet, but we are developing that.
And let me
Okay,
just add,
thank you.
and for,
On your radar.
yeah, Assemblymember Kennedy, so we also know that every summer, like Native Village is already out there doing some of their work, Fish and Game does work, so there is always ongoing work happening. We're just another party out there now, but yes, especially with the flow releases, we will have some notification and figure out the best way to get the word out.
Yeah, and then also just on the topic of public safety, kind of related, but not really related. Chugach is also, Chugach and the owners are also going through the process of updating the emergency action plan for this project. And that's something that we're going to be actively working on this year, kind of in conjunction with the development of this public safety plan for the flow releases. And so we're reaching out to all the emergency response agencies for the general emergency action plan update and tabletop exercise. And at the same time, we'll be coordinating with them to come up with the appropriate public safety plan for the flow releases this year.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are welcome. Any other questions? Hearing no questions, let's move on to the next item on our agenda. I'll say thank you to folks from Chugach and the owners of the project, and we look forward to continued progress.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys.
All right, next on the agenda is a report from the staff of the Port of Alaska, in particular on AO 2021-56, the basis of design concept submitted by the Port of Alaska Modernization Program and Design Advisory Board to govern the Phase 2 modified concept of the Port of Alaska General Purpose Cargo Terminals, Port of Alaska. So, Steve, if you want to take it over, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Assemblymember Constance. Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, I'm Steve Rebuffo, Director here at the Port of Alaska. With me here today is Jim Jager, who's our Facility Security Officer and External Affairs, Sharon Walsh, who's the manager for the municipality on the modernization program, and Mr. Jeff Bull from Jacobs Engineering. We're here because you have an item on the public hearing portion of the agenda last week, which is going to be the first of many interactions between the program and the assembly because of your desire to be a little bit more involved in the process, particularly on the design side of things as we progress through the modernization program. Recall last August, the assembly passed AO 2020-81, in which you established a construct called the Design Advisory Board for the Port of Alaska Modernization Program. We are directed by that AO to bring before the assembly through the mayor any design-related requirements that come out of the program for your review and approval before we can go on and take the next step. The backstory is that on May the 20th, and Assemblymember Constant was there with us all day, on May the 20th, we had what was called a roundtable, a design roundtable meeting. It was the culmination of a little more than 2 years of discussions, engineering, trading of information, and operational related requirements determinations for the cargo docks for the modernization program. We did a lot of discussions with all of the port users. We did simulations down at AvTech. The users involved their own engineering teams to work with Jacobs and to vet different concepts for what it was we were going to ultimately settle on for the cargo docks. We vetted two concepts, not designs, two concepts at this May 20th meeting, and the group unanimously, through consensus, agreed on one of them, and that's the one of them we're going to show you today. Once that happened, according to AO 2020-81, we convened this design advisory board, and the representatives on this board are the port director, so myself, a representative that the mayor selected, representatives from the two principal cargo dock users, Matson and Tote, and a representative from the port fuels community. So we make up the board. We met, reviewed all the material that was discussed and all the conversation that was discussed at the roundtable meeting. And we unanimously agreed on the concept that you're going to see today. Then again, according to the AO, we put that in writing and we passed it to the mayor. The mayor reviewed it, approved it, and forwarded it on to the assembly so that we could put it on your agenda for public hearing. And ultimately, we hope your approval. So that's kind of the backstory behind how we got here. And as I mentioned, this is going to be the first of many. Every time we hit a design milestone through this process, we're going to come back and go through the exact same process again as things mature and mature and mature. So you can get an understanding of what it is we've all agreed is the best way forward for the cargo docks. I'm going to turn it over now to Sharon and to Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Steve, and thank you, Assembly members, for giving us the opportunity to brief you today and to take questions. And that's we are going to keep our brief, so we have time for questions. I think you received quite a lot of material in your packet when the item was introduced last week. So hopefully you've had time to review some of that, and we're here to clarify whatever you need. Also want to thank Assembly Member Constant for attending the roundtable. It was just very helpful that he could be there for the whole day, and he paid attention for the whole day. That was awesome. Again, want to emphasize it was unanimous approval of the concept. You know, it was a one-day roundtable, but it really represented the culmination of, like Steve said, you know, year and a half to 2 years of frequent meetings and review of analysis and challenging different ideas and coming up with what everyone felt they could link arms about and go forward with. So with that, I'm going to pull up the concept and turn it over to Jeff Bull to explain it. Oops, got it. That's it. Now I just need to get the sharing business squared away. It is right here. So, presume everyone can see that? And
Go ahead. Yep.
go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Sharon. And Assembly members, thanks for your time. What you see here is the unanimously approved concept for the cargo docks. I want to reinforce what Steve said. This represents many hundreds of hours by port staff, Matson and Tote, the fuels folks were involved to some degree, and then many hundreds of hours of paid consultants. So a lot of energy and a lot of focus has been put into this. I know that the information that was sent out to the Assembly members is an absolute huge volume of information, all the analysis that we did looking at different ways to cut cost and to come up with challenge ourselves to come up with a better mousetrap. I want to thank, call out Matson and Tote were instrumental in not only participating in this process, but really driving the process. Obviously, they have a vested interest in maintaining the viability of these facilities, and Matson and Tote have been fantastic, proactive partners in this process. So thanks for all their time and what they've invested in this so far. What we did about 1.5 years ago is we took the concept at that time and we essentially stripped it down to bare bones. We took out anything that wasn't absolutely required, almost to the point where it was an inefficient process for Matson and Tote. So we really challenged ourselves to strip it down to bare bones. And then we went back and we looked at some of the discretionary scope, safety type items and things like that, and really challenged ourselves as to which of those discretionary items we wanted to keep and which ones we wanted to forego to in the effort to reduce costs. So The concept is effectively moving the berth line out 140 feet from where it currently is. Terminal 1, which is on the, Sharon, can you move the cursor over the yellow parts that you see are the terminals. So Terminal 1, where Sharon's moving her cursor there, we reduced 2 trestles off of that. It used to have 4 trestles. Now there's only a trestle on the south end and the north end. And Terminal 1 was reduced by about 200 feet. So some pretty good cost savings ideas came out with the conversations with Matson and their support on Terminal 1. Terminal 2, TOTE's minimum requirements is they really only need trestles to operate their operation. And this is where I want to point out a couple of discretionary scope items. So you can see between the, show here, right there, that piece of dock, which is the piece between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, we decided to fill that in because it made sense with respect to supporting cruise ships and other vessels. So we went through the process of bare bones with Matson and TOTE because they're the primary users. But then we went back and looked at all the other users, DOD, fuels, and all the other folks, and made discretionary changes so that it could be a full service cargo dock. So at the end of the day, we did reduce probably on the order of 150, maybe $200 million worth of scope in this process. So I think this is a major milestone, especially coming from the what I call the PCT experience, which was, you know, getting to construction contract award and then finding out that stakeholders felt that they didn't have enough involvement. So having unanimous agreement on what concept to advance is a tremendous value to us, and I think a major accomplishment. With that said, if this is approved, which we hope it is on Tuesday night, this really is just the beginning for the cargo docks. This is, we sometimes refer to this as a cartoon. We have the geometric dimensions of this, but really not a lot of detail yet. So we're going to go into, once this is approved, we go into a process called preliminary engineering where we really scrub and develop a set of design drawings that demonstrate 100% of the detailed scope. So with this approval, we'll start preliminary engineering, which is about a 1-year activity. And it also allows us to begin permitting for the cargo docks, which is the longest lead activity to replace this infrastructure, and it is about 4 years duration. So as soon as this is approved, we will begin the preliminary engineering and the permitting for these cargo docks, and that's a heavy lift and a long haul for us. So we're looking forward to getting started. What's that?
The red line. Talk about that.
Oh, I'll talk about the red line here. At about the middle of Terminal 2, there's a red line, and that's the discussion we've had so far about. Oh, okay, thanks. Yep, here, I got the cursor here. So this red line, what this is intended to demonstrate is our plan is to put a fuel offloading point integral to the cargo docks so that we have 2 fuel docks at any one time if we decide to replace the petroleum terminal from POL2 or not. We need to put a fuel point on the cargo docks, and all the fuel stakeholders were involved in this discussion and this development here. So
And
with that,
the green is filled in.
yeah, the green is just we're going to fill in the shoreline to make the shoreline more uniform across here. So the green is just some land infill areas on this plan. What else?
North expansion of the, or the 11%.
Oh, okay, the 11% is important because this is a Corps of Engineers permit requirement that the face of the PCT dock and the cargo docks, this deflection point could not be steeper than 11 degrees. And that's part of why we pulled this dock out 140 feet. We kind of did that first, and then we lined up the PCT, and now that the PCT is built, we need to maintain that 11-degree departure angle from the corner of the cargo dock. So that's the importance of the 11 degrees.
North extension.
And the north extension is a precursor project to all of this cargo dock work, where we need to cut back at least the first half, which is about here, before we can start the cargo dock construction. And what that does is it gives TOTE that'll be parked right here. This is Terminal 3. maneuvering room to come in from the north to dock while we have construction equipment to the south of them.
With that, I think we're ready for questions.
So are there any questions? Oh. Are there any questions from the membership?
Chris Waddleton.
Go ahead, Mr. Welton.
Sorry, I'm bumbling around with my queue thing. So I guess what about the kind of the old sheet pile stuff that was problematic? Do we need to tear that out? Have we relooked at that?
Our position has not changed. We haven't received any new information that would indicate that we should do anything different than the current plan to remove enough of that north extension back to a point of stability and armor that slope. So we have not received anything new that would indicate that our current plan is not the best plan.
Okay. One more. What happens to the old dock?
It just gets demolished and removed. It's a if we built around it and kind of left it in place, if you will, if that's what anybody is looking at this diagram and thinking of cost savings by not having to do anything with the old dock, it's a hazard navigation because someday it's going to fall over and it would fall into the new dock. So we have to remove it. We couldn't just kind of walk away and just leave it be, if you will. So these cargo dock construction projects, the first part will be demolishing, the part that they're going to build in front of.
All right, thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I'm wondering, are Tote and Matson both going to be able to use Terminal 3 during construction?
The construction sequencing plan that we have right now, and it's been reviewed by Matson and Tote, is Matson actually parks in front of Terminal 2, which is about here on my cursor, and Matson parks at Terminal 3.
Tote, other way around.
Excuse me. Matson parks at Terminal 2, Tote parks at Terminal 3 back here. So we can shove Matson and Tote back to the north here, and they have enough room, and we can build about 80% of Terminal 1, which is enough distance for Matson to move up and park onto the new dock while we tear out the middle section while Tote is back here on Terminal 3. We build this middle section here, move Tote forward onto it, and then demolish Terminal 3. So it's kind of a hopscotch, work our way down the line. So fortunately, we have 3 terminals that we're going to replace with 2 terminals.
And Mr. Peterson, recall the reason why we did the petroleum cement terminal first was so that we had a place to start to construct the first of the new cargo docks without interfering with petroleum and cement operations.
Yeah, my cursor is right on POL 1, which is our cement and petroleum terminal right now. So obviously it's the first thing that gets demolished. So we built the petroleum and cement terminal to the south here to allow for this kind of a domino effect, working your way to the north, demolishing, rebuilding, and moving the tenants, back and forth on the dock. So that was kind of why the PCT was the first thing that was constructed, is that it is actually an enabling project to the cargo docks.
Okay, great. I just was trying to get the timing all figured out. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dunbar is next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. So I'm wondering, what is the planned start date for the removal of the northern extension portion? And do we have to have the full plan of finance passed before that? Is removal of the northern extension part of is that sort of included in the costs that will be paid for, at least a portion, by the tariff that goes into the construction of the cargo terminal?
Let me see. Let me get the answer started for you, and then I'll let the engineers fill in the technical part that I may have left out. It has always been our position, and we haven't, and it's been substantiated by the pilots and all of the simulations that we did down at AvTech to make sure we can even dock anything at this new facility in this new configuration, is that at least a partial removal of the north end has to happen before we start the construction on the cargo docks, or you begin to create unsafe navigation approaches and or operations around even the existing facility, and we just exacerbate that when we start doing construction out in front of it. So we do need to go after the funding first to do the design and the removal of at least the south portion of the north end, which we call north end stabilization, sort of phase one, step one. And the plan of finance as it exists today has that in it. When we cost out what the cargo docks are going to cost, if we don't have anything from the lawsuit settlement in our hands yet, then those costs will be factored into the cost of the cargo docks. Recall that when that we went down to Juneau this year, one of the asks for the legislature on behalf of the port was for $136 million to do that first phase of the removal of the north end.
Sorry.
So I hope that sort of gives you a partial answer. Yes, we know it has to be considered, and certainly will do so. The financing we hope will come from either the settlement or some help from the state. And we are also undertaking a build grant, correct?
Well, PIDP.
A PIDP grant during the 2021 cycle, and that is our grant ask as well, is removal of the funding to remove the north end so that we can begin in earnest the construction on the cargo docks. And all this can be done in parallel, so design can progress while we're working the efforts to get the financing to remove that piece.
In order to build the administration building.
Yeah, and as well as moving the administration building off the dock, because this is we're on the oldest part of the facility. We are on the part that was here when you cut the ribbon on the Port of Anchorage in 1961. So it's the longest in the tooth, and you can't demolish and make room to build that first terminal of the new cargo docks unless our offices are someplace else.
Right, and we have actually done the scoping study, and we're in the middle of the phase one environmental assessment to build a new building here where our portable sand tent is now. So the sand tent would go over here, and the new administration building would go right here, which would make it easier for people to find us when they get onto port and still give us a good view of the operations. So that concept work is fairly underway, and we're going to also be applying for an Economic Development Administration grant to see if that will help. So we are out there pounding the pavement for money for these two items that have to happen.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Ms. Zalatel, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm really happy to see this come forward. I am curious, high level, what, as we move further into design with this concept, what are the big outstanding questions to be resolved moving forward that, in particular, those that would drive costs in a major way? Thanks.
That's a great question. I'm not, you caught me off guard. I will tell you that the number one issue on the cargo docks is regulatory permitting, endangered species, managing marine mammal impacts. So that is the big issue. And so we are looking, as part of the preliminary engineering scope that we're going to do, is we are going to look at an international level what other organizations are doing for marine type facilities that either reduces the number of piles or reduces the installation methods that create hydroacoustical noise. That's our big issue. We have something on the order of 900 piles in the current concept. The PCT had 71 permanent piles. So just put that in comparison. We've got a tough road ahead of us in construction if we stick with the same concept. So we've really got to dig deep and look at the foundation system underneath this dock and figure out how to reduce hydroacoustical noise either through means and methods or a different design approach. That's probably the biggest challenge with this, even bigger than finding the money.
Yeah, interesting, interesting comparison yet again. If you holding up the current dock is around 1,430 pile. So the fact that we would be going down to 900 for the new facility is, at long last to our design standards.
It's going in the right direction, but we need to cut about another 500 off of it somehow. And it's not an insurmountable task. If you look at the monopiles that we're driving on the PCT right now, they're going in way easier than we ever even hoped that they would. So that's been a real success. But I mean, you can envision a dock structure that instead of 4-foot diameter piles every 20 feet on center, you had a 12-foot diameter pile, I don't know, 100 feet on center with a larger span between them. So we've really got to dig deep and look at how to reduce marine mammal impacts. That is the big, big challenge. From a technical perspective, in terms of accommodating tote and Matson, DOD vessels and all that other stuff, there's really nothing exotic about this structure. There's really nothing unique about cast in place concrete deck and some cranes on top of it. And I'm making light of, how much effort goes into the design, but it's not technically challenging necessarily. So it's really about marine mammal impacts and minimizing and avoiding them through the design process.
Thank you for that. And the reason I raised the question, and I will probably raise it again as we move through, is it's very difficult from a policy or appropriations perspective to really talk about value engineering once we get really far into design. So if we know those outstanding items as we move through the process and get those updates, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
Are any other questions from the members? I don't hear any. We had some interested members of the community who've been involved with the port. Are any of you have questions? I'm hearing none. So I'm just going to wrap this up and say we have this item before us on Tuesday. And yes, Ms. Kennedy, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but I guess just sitting here thinking about the last conversation that Ms. Zolotel brought up, for me, kind of begs the question as to whether, how delicate is this permitting process, and what is the potential for setting us back time-wise, for costing more money, for totally impacting this design process. So I guess I would just like a little bit of insight into what this permitting, particularly for how it would impact marine animals, could sabotage some of what we're doing and where we're at today with the planning. Thanks.
Okay, I'll take that. Actually, we're waiting for, once this concept is approved, we will begin the permitting strategy, implementing our permitting strategy, and that begins with a agency charrette where we bring all the agencies that we feel will have a say in this, both regulatory and funding agencies, because the funding agencies want to make sure that environmental assessment has been done properly. So we would have an all-day meeting with all the agencies that we can think of that would be part of this approval or funding process. And we're also going to very much encourage, request, not quite demand, that the congressional delegation, we would like a staffer from each member of the congressional delegation to attend, because when it's all said and done, the National Marine Fisheries Service in Washington is really the key agency for approval for all of these items. The Corps of Engineers is used to permitting all this stuff, but the endangered species business is National Marine Fisheries. So we're really looking to have support from the congressional delegation to help us navigate this process as well. So that would be the first thing that happens, and that will happen in a month. We'd like to pull that together as much as we can get everyone's schedules aligned.
You want to talk about the 214?
Yeah.
And then the other process that we're implementing, and you'll see that in the budgetary process, is what's called a 214 agreement. And the Corps of Engineers brought this up to us about 6 months ago and said, hey, here's something that we do, and we're authorized by particular law to do it, to form an agreement with a party such as us. And what we do is we essentially fund a position at the Corps of Engineers that gives us priority. It gives us a person who is dedicated to working on our project. I think that it's not something that is unusual, but it's something the municipality hasn't entered into before. So we're in the final stages of that agreement. We will send that off to the Corps, then they will post a public notice, and once the public notice time is gone and we've appropriated the money, it's basically a GS-12 position, then we're looking to have that in place, to have a priority person at the Corps, our own special reviewer, and that will be October. We're shooting for the beginning of their fiscal year, which is October 1 this year. So we feel that's a good investment to help streamline the time, because otherwise right now, whenever we send in a permit application, we're in the queue behind everybody else. But by funding this position, we can cut that time down somewhat.
So I would just offer, Ms. Kennedy, it's a big outlier permitting process, and that's an area that this team has spent a ton of time looking at to make sure their plans kind of have the mechanisms to address the concerns and timelines that process brings to the table. So I have one question from the chat from Bill Falsey, and that is a question of, can you provide a brief update on construction season 2 of the petroleum and cement terminal?
Yes, I can. And some of you folks who live closer to downtown have probably felt some of that activity. We have 9 giant monster monopiles. They're 12-foot diameter and 200 feet long. And we have 6 of those installed now. We have 3 left to do at the face of the platform, which is actually quite a bit ahead of schedule. So we're very pleased with that. The contractor's really hitting their stride with that. The racks for the piping have been installed, hanging off the side of the dock, and the pipelines that go to the valve yard are in process of installation. So we've had pretty good weather. We have a pretty good construction team. Yes, there's always every day something scrambling for this or that, it's a dynamic situation, but we're making good progress. And of course, we always invite any of you to come down and see, just in groups small enough not to be a public meeting.
So I heard, Sharon, this last month there was a work stoppage in relationship to a permitting issue. Is that an accurate statement?
It actually, yes, you could call it a permitting issue. The work stoppage was because of the grants that we have coming, which I'm happy to say are in process, and we're not in process. They've been approved, and as of June 11th, we have authority to begin asking for reimbursement for the work that we've done under these grants, up to a cap of $45 million, which is awesome. But they couldn't release the grants until their environmental assessment was satisfied, and we have to do it over and over again for each agency that's funding. That's what I was referring to earlier. And there was one question that they had, and so we had to we couldn't do any ground disturbing activity until that question was answered. So we did have to put the contractor on hold from ground disturbing activity, meaning driving, piling, or digging in the dirt on the land. But fortunately, this contractor used that time to do a lot of prefabrication, and there was some additional cost because of that delay, but we think it was actually quite minimized, and we were happy that the contractor worked with us to do that. So they did put a lot of pieces and parts together until we got permission, satisfied the question, and got permission to start stabbing things into Mother Earth.
So, on a project this big, your lessons learned not only come from the construction, process, which informs what you're thinking about the cost of things are going to be going forward. But we are learning an awful lot, not only about what makes a successful grant application, but what it is to finally get your hands on the money when you get an award. It shouldn't take a year and a half from the announcement that you got a grant award before you can begin to get reimbursed for those dollars. So we've kind of sort of learned that, the hard way. And I honestly believe that the agencies learned a little bit too, because they didn't appreciate what a challenge it was for them to get permission to say okay to us. So there's been a lot of learning going on that's going to make it, as we progress through this whole thing, go a little bit smoother. As long as the corporate knowledge stays with the folks that have been climbing the learning curve together here.
That's right. And we have actually, Senator Murkowski visited us about 6 weeks ago, and we went through this whole scenario with her and her staff. And they're going to look into why we have to do things over and over again for each agency, and if there's a way to streamline agencies' approval. If we did all this investigation and for the Corps of Engineers, every time you submit all that information and tweak it for another agency's, variables, it's an incredible cost and incredible delay. And in the end, delay is the biggest cost of all. So.
There's a lot of time and talent. So free money is with a small f, not a capital F.
Right.
All right, thank you. And any last questions on this topic before we move on? Seeing none, I would offer in my conversations with the operators down there, they did unanimously support the proposed framework under AO 2021-56. Oh, there's actually one last question there. Can you update me on the approval of this item by the Design Advisory Board? Because I know that it wasn't, and then I think there was a meeting held.
Yeah, there was a meeting held on June the 2nd.
Right.
And we've, it's recorded. I'm the secretary and the chair, and I haven't gotten around to transcribing the recording yet. But we did have a formal meeting, and we will publish minutes to that meeting, and that's where the unanimous unanimous decision of the Design Advisory Board to support this is codified. But in all the paperwork that went to the mayor for her to forward to you for this action next Tuesday night, all of that is documented.
Thank you. And I would note as well, in speaking with the incoming administration, heard from them that they did have someone in the room for the meeting that I attended, and that they were supportive of the framework that was being presented by the users. And so they may have different opinions as they move into the new, when they're actually in the office, but that conversation was had between myself and the mayor-elect. So with that, we're going to move on to the stormwater. Or is there any other business anyone wants to add to the agenda's new business? Going once, going twice. Hearing none. Now, is there someone present to make a stormwater utility update? We added this as a standing item for the time being. And
yes.
So,
Mr. Chair, this is Tamás Deák. I'm the chairperson of the commission, and Todd Carroll is the leader for the project. So generally, I think what we agreed last time is that we give you a brief update on both of those topics. And just to make it go fast, I'll just start on the commission work. So we had our but the monthly meeting this week of the commission. On a topic was feedback from the project status, or on the project status. Todd will talk about that, as well as discussion on the public process for the commission itself. There is a subcommittee formed which will look at a more formalized process plan and schedule for taking public testimony and being part of the public process for the Stormwater Utility Commission to be able to function and be present for public input. And I think the next meeting in July, we'll be focusing on the subcommittee work. And we will have our formal meeting in August to continue our work and working with the project team to look at the process of the contracted work. And I think that's all I get. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Does anybody have questions? I don't see any at this time. I think that on our part, we are still looking at the proposal to change the structure of the committee membership, and we don't have a draft yet. I was hoping that a member of the staff at AWW would be able to help us with the preliminary, so we'll know about that soon. Any last comments, Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
I think we need to probably talk about then Todd, a report on the project itself.
Okay.
Right, yeah, I'm here and I can do that portion. Thank you. So on the project effort itself from the project team, we have the final draft of the public involvement plan in hand. We are working on gathering information from the various municipal departments to help baseline the stormwater infrastructure and costs and the like for use in the future phases of the work and public outreach. And we are basically in what we're calling PIP Step 1, the project launch. Those development activities are underway for implementation this fall when summer break, quote unquote, is over and people are back in school and in session with community councils and the like. And of course, we're continuing our coordination with the commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members? I'm hearing none. Okay, it's a brief report. Thank you very much. We just have a few more minutes for the committee. Are there any proposals for legislative priorities? Next item. Hearing none at this time. Budget items for 2022. Hearing none at this time. And the final item on the agenda is audience participation.
Hello? Hello?
Mr. Haberman, you are recognized.
Okay, my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more likely in public interest. First, I'd like to say, with regard to the working of the Port of Alaska, please note again, I continue expressing out in the Valley my concerns with the mismanagement of the port in the Valley, and called for a federal investigation of the way they handle things, and called for also the full support of the Port of Alaska, Anchorage. And as recently as last Tuesday night's Borough Assembly meeting, I repeated those same words. So with what was said today regarding the port, I'm very thankful, and I see how the Port Commission staff are more cooperating and respecting what I do, particularly over the years, and they are handling the meetings very well. But I still am concerned is not the Port Commission is well done in the meetings there, but as you heard, there were several other type of meetings that were addressed to you today, and different meetings that were from appointments by the Assembly on legislation. And those meetings, I don't see any public notice and ability for the public to connect on. The Port Commission meeting itself is, yes, noticed and properly handled, but these other meetings, these critical meetings that are, and I keep on hearing the word stakeholders, it concerns me, and I know the Assembly puts words in legislation saying stakeholders, but whenever you have the word stakeholders, you're indicating that certain people are invited and other people are not. And that's not a true, appropriate public meeting. But Tuesday night I'll say more, but I am very thankful, and I see a great deal of professionalism by the staff with the Port of Alaska and the commission, and I'm very thankful I see that compared to what I see out in the Valley. And you show a really good job there, respect overall, and thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Haberman. Any members of the public? Anyone else? Hearing none, right on time. Last comments from members? Hearing none. The ultimate comment, a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you. We're adjourned.